Hi friends, welcome back. Just Christina here, and this is part 5 of the Mark is Ready, Are You by Ron Steele. And today I want to share with you an interview by radio host Ackerman and author Steele. Dennis Ackerman is asking Mr. Ron Steele questions regarding his book, and he states that he finds it quite fascinating and asks him how he got into it in the first place. And he simply states that he started researching it after his brother-in-law his cousin in 1971, who was a Seventh-day Adventist, turned his direction to the Revelation verse, chapter 13, verse 16 and 17, regarding, as he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And so this Revelations verse really struck him to do more research to find out about it, and he was quite intrigued about this mark. So he started turning his research towards this prophecy, and regarding this matter, he interviewed and investigated people in various programs, and some of them are part of this animal identification system, and some of them are working on the human identification system side of things. So Ackerman says, "You're right, it's most thought-provoking to say at the least. I guess now would be a good time to discuss the work that Los Alamos Labs is doing in conjunction with animal identification." So the Los Alamos Laboratory, located in Los Alamos, New Mexico, he found out about this through Dr. Farrell. And this lab does get a lot of government funding because of the type of work that they do. So they're supported by the USDA and the Energy Research and Development Administration under what is known as the USDA ERDA Interagency Agreement. There is one particular gentleman there that is a doctor. I will not disclose his name. And he was at that time working on subdermal implants. Sub meaning under, dermal meaning skin, implant meaning insert. So these subdermal implants meant to insert under the skin as a passive electronic device that is placed inside the animal by surgical means. The transponder, aka RFID chip, as it's called, so back then it was called the transponder, needs no batteries to make it work and will last a lifetime in the animal. A microwave interrogator actuates the transponder, which in turn sends encoded signals back to the interrogator unit. Did you hear what I said? A microwave transponder activates the unit. So anytime there is a microwave being aimed at or near the transponder, aka RFID chip, it sends a signal. The RFID chip picks it up and it sends it back to the transponder, aka 5G tower. So, who brought all of this into being in the first place, and who is really behind the identification program? Well, the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service of the United States Department of Agriculture has joined with the Energy Research Development Administration to design a modern, effective system for the positive ID of every valuable livestock animal in the entire world. So that's not just the US and Canada, that's everywhere. And Los Alamos Labs has been responsible for its development. So the Livestock Conservation Institute just appointed a subcommittee of the Livestock Identification Committee to serve as the coordinating body on electronic identification for the livestock industry. This body will establish the standards to be followed in the manufacturing of devices and interrogation equipment that will qualify to be part of the National Identification System. This subcommittee will be known as the National Livestock Electronic Identification Board, or the NLEIB, which will take input from all interested and participating groups through petitions or hearings. So you had to petition to have your animals tracked or chipped, essentially, and you had to pay for it. And furthermore, they said that any local, state, or federal agency is expected to work with this board for implementation or the use of the devices for livestock, etc., etc. And that means that you just can't go and put your own tracking chips in your own animals. You have to go through them, and they are going to track you. So never mind tags on your cow's ears, right? Never mind closing the farm gate. All right, so this is essentially the groundwork being formed for a nationwide animal electronic identification system. A number bank is now underway that will assign and distribute identifying numbers to individual animals on a national basis. This involves dairy, beef, swine, and other species, including zoological and research animals, including pets. So, zoological animals being in every zoo across the entire nation, research animals in every single lab, pets in our homes, all of the wildlife animals that they practiced on. All right, and pets also. So it says, yes, there is a provision for pets in this master plan of electronic animal identification also. As a matter of fact, machinery, trucks, automobiles, boxcars, and so on are considered to fit right into this program as well. Is anything that moves, essentially. So there is even right now talk of having electronic license plate identification systems. So that's quite interesting because now in this day and age, of course, we do have license plate registry, and we have our tags, and we have our counties, and so it's already been implemented. So it says it's like having all products in the marketplace identified with a UPC code and then having them scanned with a laser beam scanner at the checkout counter. There is a number bank that assigns and distributes identifying numbers for products in much of the same way that you're speaking here. So this particular bank is called Distribution Codes Incorporated, and it deals with the UPC symbol, which most everyone is familiar with. So it's actually a corporation that deals with the barcodes and implements them and assigns them to every single product that we buy, sell, and trade. It's been around since April 3rd of 1972. It's on every single package we find now at the supermarket. And I guess you can really tell an antique by the fact that it doesn't have a barcode on it, right? All of those antiquities and those old books, they don't have UPC codes on the back of them. And it's even on like magazines and everything today. So Ackerman says it's on every single product. But identifying products as one thing and animals as another. So do you think animals are going to be numbered like all various products, or do you mean species-wise? And Steele says, well, so far Dr. Farrell has been very successful in marking just about every kind of animal you can think of. For instance, he's marked, now get this, okay, this is what they practiced on. Mice, cats, dogs, hogs, goats, cows, horses, guinea pigs, deer, elk, mink, coyotes, primates, the Uganda cob, I don't know what that is, eland, I don't know what that is either, rhinos, elephants, snakes, seals, fish, crabs, whales, manatee, turtles, porpoise, dolphin, alligators, and so on. So I wonder what the so on is, right? Like, I would not want to catch any of those animals, let alone try and give them a tattoo. So that's some list. Including but not limited to the Arabian horse systems that were implemented. So essentially in Egypt, they were required to be freeze marked with what is known as Farrell's star. And it is that double black box that is laid over itself to make this star pattern. And it has numbers that essentially identify the animals. So Dr. Farrell's star is readily gaining acceptance in worldwide scope. Some countries require the use of horse passports, which enables the horse to be transported from one country to another. Similar to the United States, New Mexico had what was called a horse permit, enabling the horse to be transported anywhere throughout the entire state without the usual inspection that would take place every time a person would want to take his horse somewhere. The passport system is computer compatible, and other states are looking at that type of concept, and other countries too. So it becomes almost impossible now not to have identification papers or some sort when transferring livestock across the state line. The state of Washington is requiring this now, and it is increasing quite rapidly. So when I say now, I'm talking about an interview that took place in 1976. So this has been going on for decades. And we just accept it as part of society now, right? It's just something that we have to do. but it's all part of that regulation. So, all right, moving forward, the British Columbia Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, or the BC SPCA, has published legislation to have domestic pets marked and registered. This program, called Operation Tattoo, was set up by Secretary Manager for the BC SPCA, and he recommended that each animal be tattooed on the inside right ear. Another agency, the Canadian Kennel Club, required their dogs to be tattooed or nose printed. So that's weird, right? It's like fingerprinted, but nose printed for your dog. It says you might be surprised to know that the National Dog Registry has tens of thousands of dog owners registered in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, and Canada. These dog owners have their social security numbers tattooed on the dog's inner hind right leg. There are numerous animal tattooers throughout the country, and I am not going to give you their names because this gives a list of several in the Pacific Northwest region. So, additionally, there was an education coordinator at a county animal control in an Oregon office, and that is all the more information I will give you. But this particular control officer organized, she wanted to have all of these animals, including cats, dogs, sheep, goats, chickens, turkeys, donkeys, cows, horses, and so forth. She wanted every one of them to have an ID tag or an ID collar. So, interestingly enough, back in the day, you didn't really have to have your animals tagged or tracked or chipped or collared or anything. And then they thought, oh, it's such a great idea. But now, not only do you not have a choice of registering your dogs, you will get a ticket for it, and you will have to go and get them registered and pay the annual fees to have your animals anyway. So you don't have a choice. That's just the way it is now, and it all started with this. All right, so we're going to move on to the next section of government research, which is quite unusual, and you may or may not have heard of it. Chances are you haven't, but it is called the Individual Fly Identification Program, whereby flies were dropped from an airplane and then tracked by laser beams and microwave techniques. This was done by technicians employed at the Los Alamos labs, and it does sound pretty remarkable, but I can actually see them doing that, right? Now they're talking about tracking things with laser beams, tracking flies. I'm sure that technology has increased and exponentially in this day and age, and it's gotten a lot more sketchy. So it says, for instance, the marking of products is one thing. I can see some advantages, but to a certain extent. I guess animal identification is important in some respect, but the marking of people, don't you think that's going too far? And the author, Mr. Steele, says, yes, I do agree with you, it's going too far. However, if you were to examine history of the transponder's original purpose, you might be convinced the principle could easily be adapted for human application without too much opposition. The transponder concept can be readily understood when reviewing the 1964 proposal by Ralph and Robert Schweizgebel, the twin apostles of behavioral engineering. They both had a law degree and a doctorate in psychology, and they tested their electronic rehabilitation system on a number of offenders and mental patients in Boston. This was done in order to prove his idea was feasible and to study its psychological and social effects. So Schweizgebel and his colleagues conducted a crude prototype of an electronic watchdog system and outfitted 16 volunteers with transceivers, set up receiving stations, and monitored their subjects' whereabouts. So this particular study that they did, it basically put them on a short leash, didn't it? It put them on an invisible leash, and kind of similar to being locked up, I would say. So they didn't really have their freedom because they were being watched and monitored by this chip anyway. So from a mental patient to a prisoner, and they had 16 people total, 2 of which were outside free volunteers, but the other 14, they were locked up. So I don't really think they were voluntary. I think they were more or less just used in the study. So Schweizgebel reported some interesting sidelights to his experiment. For instance, he found some of the prisoners wanted to continue participating in the system to avoid harassment in the community by police who picked them up whenever offenses were committed in their neighborhoods. So these guys were guilty until proven innocent, essentially, just because by proxy of the location of where they were, and because they just so happened to be repeat offenders, they were blamed for things that they potentially didn't even do. Um, which I guess in this day and age, you are guilty until proven innocent, right? So it just so happened that two of the 16 participants were free people. One was a businessman, another was a student, and each had his own reason for volunteering. It turned out that one physician liked the system because it allowed him to be in contact with his wife 24 hours a day. Another interesting sidelight was the answer a mental patient gave one day after being buzzed 30 or 40 times an hour, and then having to push his own button in response to report his position. At the end of the day, he met with his monitor, who asked him if he had received the tones. He replied, "Yes, thank you." So he was actually thanking his buzzer person, his monitorer, uh, for buzzing him anytime he had a dangerous behavior. So it's kind of like you're thanking them to track you, and you don't have enough faith in yourself to handle your own behaviors in society, and you become codependent on them to tell you what's right and wrong. So another thing to remember is that we are supposed to be living in a free country. This so-called panacea of crime and the like poses certain potential threats to our individual liberties. Let me give you an illustration of how things can get out of hand and result in the murder of liberty. So last August, Lawrence Wallach appeared in court in Ocean Beach, New York, on charges of eating a chocolate chip cookie in public. Ruth Bushnell was up on charges for eating crumb cake, and Michael Mastrodea was before the judge because he had been caught holding a glass of water. All of this because of an ordinance whose purpose is to hold down the litter in the Fire Island village. One person commented, "The village's ban on public eating is hard to swallow. My statement is simply this: if a police officer was present to arrest someone for eating in public, then he could very well have arrested the same person for littering. But in this case, no one was guilty of littering. What it all boils down to is more control over the American citizen, the majority of which suffer due to the laws and programs supposedly aimed at reforming the minority." So that's quite interesting. The police couldn't go out and handle people littering, so they created a new ordinance that there was no public eating, and anyone who got busted for public eating went to jail and had to go see the judge and got fined. And okay, I guess they didn't go to jail, but they got fined and they had to go see the judge. So that's pretty ridiculous to me. Um, that's another reason that bids me not to condone such a scheme of the transponder system for human beings. Unfortunately, there are those who feel that there is a certain poetic justice that can be attained through the utilization of this concept. Blank blank is one of these. Blank blank is a computer specialist who works with the National Security Agency. The secret intelligence organization spies on other government agencies with satellites and ships such as the Pueblo and so forth. He has developed an idea that comes from the Pentagon's Peace Fair program. It is basically a scheme for attaching miniature electronic devices to criminals or other suspects and keeping track of them by computers. Myers calls it the Criminal Deterrent Transponder System, the details of which were described to him in January 1971 issue of Transactions on Aerospace and Electronic Systems, a publication of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. So initially, the transponders would be attached to 20 million subscribers as a condition of bail or parole. Each subscriber would be identified by a unique code, which would be transmitted several times a minute to a computer via a network of transceivers deployed throughout neighborhoods like existing police call boxes. The computer would record the subscriber's location and compare it with a stored file that would specify the normal schedule for the subscriber and any territorial or curfew restrictions. If the computer found the subscriber to be in violation of these restrictions, it would instruct the transponder to warn its wearer of the transgression. So essentially, this is like the ankle bracelet now. They can track you and they say, okay, you're supposed to be at home, you're on home arrest. We found out that you're not home. Now we know where you are because you're wearing a tracking bracelet. And, they can go as far as uh, telling exactly where you have been. And that doesn't sound like freedom to me. That sounds like they know where you are at all times. They tell you what to do. They know if you do anything outside of the norm. They know if you don't adhere to your schedule. It's kind of BS. So it says the transponders would be attached in such a way that they could not be removed without the computer knowing it. Subscribers who discard or tamper with their transponders would be classified as renegades and would be charged with a felony. Furthermore, by defining tampering as a federal crime, the renegade has to stay in hiding everywhere he goes. So it seems that in practice, the computer would effectively control the lives of the person plugged into it. So Myers' aim for the transponder surveillance scheme is to constrain criminals and arrestees into behavior like law-abiding citizens. If this aim is fulfilled, then most of the subscribers will do ordinary things like get up in the morning and go to work. At night, they stay close to home to avoid being implicated in crimes. At their place of work, a human surveillance system will operate, and low-powered transceivers in their domiciles can monitor them indoors. So Mr. Ackerman says, Ron, how would something like this be implemented on an involuntary basis without any changes in existing laws? And Mr. Steele says, well, parole is often considered to be a substitute for the harsher treatment of imprisonment, and the substitution may be viewed as a gift of the state, subject to whatever conditions the state imposes, or as a contract by which the convict accepts conditions in return for release. So essentially, they're saying, as a condition of you getting out and getting paroled, you have to have this transponder. So, yet, as pointed out by the Harvard Law Review in 1966, this might be the Justice Department's solution to the outcry that arose from the public and legal community when it proposed preventative detention. And in 1967, the President's Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice remarked that an intermediated position short of a full system of preventative detention would be to impose conditions on a person's release designed to reduce the likelihood of criminal acts pending trial. So many transponder systems make it possible for society to continually observe those that it declares to be misfits. And we're talking like a national system here. This is a parole system that's nationwide. So Mr. Ackerman continues to say, in the physical control of the mind, Dr. Jose Delgado reports it is now possible, through electronic stimulation of the brain, to induce, inhibit, and modify such phenomena as movement, desire, sleep, rage, aggression, fear, pain, anxiety, excitement, and euphoria. Now, to your knowledge, has any human being ever received an electronic implant like this for the sole purpose of rehabilitation? And Mr. Steele admits that yes, as a matter of fact, 17 people have received electronic device controls in their life. The gadgets have been surgically implanted on the surface of their brain over an area known to control sensations of pleasure. In effect, the so-called brain pacemaker stimulates pleasant feelings while switching off negative emotions such as fear, rage, and violence. This brain pacemaker has wires connected to a receiver, which is implanted near the surface of the chest. The user carries a battery-operated stimulator in his pocket, which sends signals to the receiver. After being actuated by the stimulator for a 5-minute on, 5-minute off schedule, the receiver's impulses are sent to the pacemaker. Once there, they influence the brain and thereby alter everyday responses of the subscriber, who, incidentally, does not even feel the whole process working. So, this is ridiculous. This is things that have been going on for decades, for 40 or 50 years already, and they've already been able to implant brain diodes to control your behavior. They are working on these microwaves and these specific lasers and in your head kind of thought transmissions. Like, do you guys remember when they had that installation in New York, and as you walked by it, you could like hear the words for the movie inside your head? I cannot remember what it was, but I'll try and find the link and I'll try and leave it below. But ultimately what it is they are influencing you without you hearing it with your outer ear, and you're receiving these transmissions in your inner ear, And it's literally the voice of God. I think Richie from Boston did a video on it, and I think he termed it like the voice of God. So this is quite remarkable that it's been around for this long, and they have essentially perfected it over decades and refined this technology from something that you have to voluntarily go and get a diode for implanted, and now they can just do it without you even knowing. So, all right, next we're going to be moving on to the next section. That concludes the interview in a nutshell, and I think you're really going to like what is in the next section because it regards everybody's favorite topic. Look, right here. Here it is, right there. Dun, 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 dun. Da, da, da. The See ya. See ya. So we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for joining me, friends.